have you ever felt like you were doing all the right things and yet nothing is happening? You know what I mean? I'm moving, but nothing is different. I'm coming to church. I'm trying to be the best me that I know God has called me to be, but yet nothing seems to have shifted. I'm believing to the best of my ability, but I don't see anything. I'm doing all that I know to do, but why? Why does it look like nothing else is moving? Like nothing's changing. I'm doing everything I know to do. I'm moving all around, but nothing else is moving. It seems like everybody around me, people to the left and to the right, every one of them, they have miracles every week. Their stimulus, it hit the minute that came out of somebody's mouth. It was like they were stimulated, and I'm still over here broke. You know, apparently my miracle is in quarantine because it is not here. You know what I'm talking about? It seems like God has somehow missed me, and yet I'm doing all that I know to do. So today, if this is you, I want to help you in your frustration. Because how many of you know how we measure change and how God measures change are entirely different? Right? The signs that we are usually looking for and the means that God usually uses are most often completely different. Change can be happening and yet you don't see it. You're not aware of it because why is that? I believe because sometimes it takes a lot longer for our natural eye to see what has actually been going on all along. And I wonder if God is up in heaven chuckling a little bit because he's like, if they only knew, if you only knew what I know, if you only could see what I could see, then you would stop being so frantic and you would start to understand that this is all a process. This is not the end. See, you don't have to understand God's plan to trust his purpose. There are things happening that you have absolutely no clue about. So I want to encourage you today to take heart because sometimes progress isn't obvious. But God doesn't want you to trust in your progress. He wants you to have faith in the promise that he has made. I mean, you know how we get. I just feel like God's not doing anything. I'm praying, and he is not hearing because my circumstances are not changing. You know. I look at all the details of my life, and I just really feel like he is doing absolutely nothing. All day, every day, God is completely disconnected from my life. When in reality, when we feel like God is doing nothing, you know what? He is actually crafting chapter after chapter with the story of our lives. He is fully invested. He is fully engaged in all the details of your everyday living. He is never not doing something. See, I believe in the sovereignty of God. And this should bring you great hope in today's world. Because when you get a grasp of it, it really does give you this sense of peace and stability, and it brings trust. Because, see, God's sovereignty is this overarching orchestration of all that happens in both time and eternity. But see, sovereignty doesn't just mean that he's already seen it all, because he has. It also means that he's got the whole thing in the palm of his hand. See, sovereignty is what lets us do what Psalms 46:10 says we should do. It lets us be still and know that I am God. Because we trust his sovereignty. Sovereignty is his overarching control of the universe. But within this big umbrella of sovereignty, there is a word called providence. And providence is the working out of all the details in your life and mine. See, when we feel like he is doing nothing, when we feel like our days are just filled with 8 to 5 and we're just going round and round and nothing is happening, or we've run into tragedy or difficulty, providence is knowing that God is orchestrating all the details of our days, of our lives, of our encounters, of our opportunities, of our circumstances, and that he is actually ordering our footsteps. Providence is Jeremiah 29:11, which says, God is speaking. He says, I know the plans that I have for you. God says, I got plans for you that you don't even know. I've designed things for you. Before the foundations of the world, I designed a purpose and a plan for you to give you a hope and a future. Providence is Ephesians 2:10 that says, we are his workmanship created by Christ Jesus for good works. Providence means you can trust him with all the stuff in your life, because you can know that God is orchestrating it all. See, spiritual maturity means that even when I can't trace his hand, I can trust his heart. Because he's there. He is fully present, fully engaged, fully invested in the details of your life. Scripture reminds us that he is always there. He is woven throughout the tapestry of every story. Our responsibility, yours and mine, is to stay in the story that God is writing for your life. Because God is never asleep. He is always working. Even when I don't see it, he's working. Even when I don't feel it, he's working. He never stops working. We have to realize that. While you are in this room today, I can with a surety say that every one of you have something that you could be doing. A weight, a responsibility, something that you put on the shelf so that you could give God your first. And what you have to realize is while you're in this room right now, you know what he's doing? He's working on it. That thing that you were concerned that he'd forgotten about, he hasn't. But see, God's perspective is very different from ours. And there are seasons when God is going to teach us how to war in a different way. And I believe it's imperative as we enter into 2021 that we learn this. See, the Bible is full of stories and enemies and conflicts, and all these different battles were fought. But you know what? All of them were so very different. And there were different tactics and strategies and plans that God would use. And so today I want us to look again at the story of Joshua in the Battle of Jericho. It's found in Joshua chapter 6. And here Joshua is moving into new territory. He's replaced Moses as the leader of Israel, which had to be daunting in itself. And he's tasked with leading the children of Israel into the promised land. This land that they had been told was flowing with milk and honey. But there is a huge, great, big problem in the way. And it's called Jericho. It's this massive, intimidating city where the enemy had camped inside. It's impossible to get over the wall. There's no way to break down the gates of the city. And the children of Israel had finally moved close. And here's this new opportunity, but it came with a problem. And God was going to choose a battle plan that at first glance doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, right? But if you actually think about it, it makes perfect sense. Because of the people that were going to be needed to win this battle. See, the children of Israel, a little context, they had a history of circling. Their parents were circlers. They had come from a generation who had wandered around in a wilderness for way longer than they were supposed to be. Missing out on the promises of God for an entire generation. God had to wait for them to die off. See, God had given them the same battle plan for victory. But they didn't want to hear it. They didn't like it. They grumbled. They complained. They argued with the leadership. And so God was like, all right, I'll just let you circle up till y'all die off. And so here God comes and he gives Joshua the same plan. And he says, you can now go into this new land. And so see, the older people, they didn't get there quick. They didn't say, okay, how do we do it, God? They just wandered around and around and around. They lost heart. They rebelled because they wouldn't believe the word of the Lord. And so it took them 40 years to go an 11-day journey. Round and round and round. And yet, this is the battle plan that God gives Joshua too. Don't you love it when God does stuff like that? I mean, he chooses the most unlikely means to accomplish his purpose. Do you know that God could use your greatest mistake to bring about his intended miracle? He can take what seems to be a family curse and use it to actually bring about victory for future generations. That's what we're going to read in this story today, and I love that. It's my prayer today that when you leave out of here today, you will have a new circling plan so that the next week when you come back, things will have shifted and you can begin to advance. Because if you believe that what God says is true, then he will work in your behalf. So let's pick up this story. Here we go. Joshua chapter 6, verses 1 through 5. It says, "Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went in and out. The Lord said to Joshua, 'See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have the 7 priests carry the trumpets of ram's horn in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound the long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. And then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go in and do what they need to do.'" So God gives Joshua this plan for victory, right? They are to yet again walk around a city, circle up. I mean, how crazy that had to have been for people they've been doing this. They're like, uh-oh, I've seen this before. I know how this turns out. But I love that God just tells them in verse 2, he said, "See, Joshua, I have given Jericho. I have delivered it into your hands." If you have a Bible or in your phone, I would say underline that. Highlight it. I have delivered Jericho into your hands, especially the I have. See, God didn't say, "I might." He didn't say, "I'm thinking about it." It could quite possibly happen in the future. Not if you're good enough. Not if you have enough faith. Not if the wind is blowing in just the right direction. It says, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands." See, the walls were still up at this time. Nothing is moving. Looks exactly the same. Still very intimidating. But here's the secret. There is a way to see that has absolutely nothing to do with your natural eyes and everything to do with your spiritual understanding. I have already given you the victory. And today, some of you, if you would just see what God needs and wants you to see, you would walk out of here completely different than the way that you walked in. But what happens is day after day after day, they went around. They had a history of this, going around and not seeing any results. Every day looked pretty much like the day before. Does that sound familiar? Here we are, 2021, a brand new year, and it's pretty much shaping up to be just like the one we just walked out of. Everything looks exactly the same. But I'm here to tell you, if you could understand and see that God's already done it. See, this book right here, it is full of words that say things like, "See, I have already conquered death. See, I have already healed your diseases. See, I am already your provider. I am already your deliverer. I have already fought the good fight of faith and won your freedom. I have already paid the price for your brokenness so that you can become whole and walk in freedom." When God is doing stuff, we got to see it. Because what God is doing in you is far more important than a lot of times what we want God to do for us. The first thing you got to remember as you begin to complete the circle around Jericho is this. You got to circle the promise and not the problem. circle the promise and not the problem. So, I don't know what your Jericho is. I don't know. So this up here, we'll put Jericho on the screen behind me. Maybe your Jericho is debt. Maybe it's a broken relationship or sickness in your body. Maybe it's failure at work or loneliness or unemployment. I don't know. I don't know what your Jericho is, but you do. You know the way it dominates you. You know the way it's ever present on your mind, how it strikes that fear in your heart. And though you are in the promised land, we're saved. We're in a place where God said there were going to be good things for us. It's still there. Jericho's still there. And you know what it does? It kind of takes the edge off of what you should be enjoying. It puts that sour into your sweet. And Lord knows you're hoping nobody says anything about it. I mean, you know what your Jericho is. You're very much aware. But you're like hoping nobody notices it. Nobody says anything about it. You know, we dress it up, make it look pretty. And you just trying to ignore it, hoping that everybody will look past it. And so you're moving in your ministry. You're moving in your life. But this thing, this Jericho, it ain't moving. It's still here. And God said, though, it's going to come down. He said, I've already decided its fate. But you are going to have to learn to circle it. You got to move around it. But God, can't you just take it away? Can't you just remove it? Bippity, boppity, boom. It's still there. I mean, let's just be over and done with this COVID mess, God. Can't we just shout and get it out today? And so to experience the victory that God had promised, they had to begin a process. God had given them a battle plan. But here's the thing. When you circle, you know what happens? Wherever you are, that thing you're circling, it's there too. Like it's not moving. I'm circling, but it's still here. Every time you turn, yeah, it's still there. It's not like you're drifting off and then it just comes back. Oh, no, it's right there, front and center, always there. It's at the dinner table. It's that person that reminds you of it. It's the comment that somebody says that just triggers you. It's ever present when you're circling. You're not escaping it. And you just keep looking at it. Every time you go around, there it is. There's my circle. There's my Jericho. But the thing is, you've got to decide what you are going to see as you circle. See, God told you your battle plan was to circle, but He did not tell you what you had to look at as you circle. One of my absolute favorite scriptures is 2 Corinthians 4, 16 through 18, because it talks about that I fix my eyes on what is unseen, which is eternal. I don't look at just what I can see, which is temporary. That's how I don't give up. So my question to you today is, are you going to see Jericho or are you going to see Jesus? Are you going to see the problem or are you going to see the promise? That God said it's going to come down. As you walk around it, are you going to see with fear or are you going to see with faith? What are you going to focus on as you circle? Because you have a choice. You can either focus on the wall or you can focus on the Word. And when you're circling, you got to learn where to put your eye. So I might have to walk around Jericho. I absolutely may have to, because that's my battle plan. But you know what? I may have to circle it for days. I may have to circle it for years. But I got to tell you, as I walk around, you know what I'm going to be doing? I'm going to walk with the Word. And that's going to be my focus. God said He's going to deliver this into my hand. God says, by His stripes I am healed. God says that I have a future and a hope. God says that my best days are still in front of you. So you know what? I know it's here. I know Jericho's here. But I ain't giving you no more of my attention. Because I'm just circling you. And you're about to fall down. So when you walk, you just keep walking. But you keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Because see, you know what Jericho does? It wants to intimidate you. Oh, it's there. And I'm not going to be intimidated by you. I'm going to walk around you. But I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at the Word. And God said to circle you. He didn't say to worship you. He didn't say to talk about you. He didn't say to think about you. He didn't say to put you on a pedestal. He said circle you. So that's all I'm going to do. But there's a couple of ways that you can circle. You can do a defeated lap. Ugh. Here we go, 2021. Just like 2020. This is crazy. I can't believe this. Here I am. So hard. I hope they don't mention it again. Gosh, I hope no one sees me. You can either circle and defeat, or you can say, my lap gonna be a victory lap. Go ahead and give me my flag. I'm coming right here because I'm winning something. I got a victory lap that I'm rolling with. Every single day, you got a decision to make. Are you gonna stand up and walk in what God says will be your future? See, some of you have made Jericho way more special than it ever needs to be. You've made it way bigger than it ever should have been. The first thing you got to do if you're going to complete the circle is you got to circle the promise and not the problem. The second thing is you got to circle in confidence and not in criticism. Circle in quiet confidence and not continuous criticism. Look at Joshua 6:10. It says, but Joshua had commanded the army, do not give a war cry. Do not raise your voices. Do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. And when I tell you to shout, you better shout. See, the generations before them in the desert, in the wilderness that had wandered, they had circled too. But I just wonder, maybe conversations began on the first lap. Ooh, it's hot. I'm hot. I'm tired. I mean, what are we doing anyways? I mean, whose plan is this? I don't really think he heard from God. I'm just telling you, if I were in charge, we would not be doing this. And you know how criticism goes. It's like just explodes. And it wasn't long before lots of other people began to chime in with their opinions and murmur about every step. And once you start doing that, there's just no end to the list of things that can be talked about. Sometimes we have to understand that the silence can be the most powerful gift you give yourself. When you're circling your Jericho, that is not the time to have a conversation with it. That's not the time to dress it up, to make improvements. You just circle. You have a conversation with God. That's the only person you need to be talking to about your Jericho. Because you can't move on to promised land living with a wilderness mentality. You've got to circle with confidence and not criticism. The best thing for you to do is circle and say stuff like, today I hold my peace. Today I walk around my Jericho with a silent confidence in the God I serve because I know he's at work. Today I'm walking around this thing that has obstructed me and it's blocked me, and you know what? My prayer is going to be an internal one because my confession inside me, it is stronger than all the conversations all around me. And you just keep walking. I'm not talking to Jericho. I'm talking at Jericho. I'm saying what God has put on the inside of me. I'm not conversating with it. What do you think? Well, I just don't know. I don't need the distraction. You're going to have to trust as you go around and around. To complete the circle, you've got to circle the promise and not the problem. You've got to circle in quiet confidence and not continuous criticism. And the third thing is you've got to circle in faith and not frustration. Circle Jericho with the faith that you didn't have last week. Come on, circle it with the absolute prayer that's going on the inside of you. Here we are for 21 days building you up so that you can have faith that God is going to do what he said he could do. God, I'm circling. I'm not going to start talking about it again. I'm not going to get involved in all that critique. I'm not going to feed my frustration as I circle. I'm not going to give an inch to the enemy. I'm just going to bring it all to you, God. I'm going to give it all to you, Father. And in that place of being quiet and steadfast, I'm telling you, something begins to build on the inside of you. And it's called a holy roar. And it's from the Lion of the tribe of Judah, because you realize that he is going to fight your battles for you. You just have to circle with him. There's going to be an energy that begins to come because greater is he that's in you than he that is in the world. Wouldn't it be great, if God just put a clock on our our dreams or on our Jericho, you know, like a timer that went down. And so as you're walking around, you're like, oh, good, 36 minutes. Good, you come back around, you're like, oh, look, it's at 34. I mean, if you're me, then I start timing how many laps is it going to take, and I'm going to go a little faster so I can help God and get a little quicker. And then I'm push them out of my way so I can get there faster. I'm sorry about your Jericho. I got to get to my Jericho. You're like, wouldn't that be amazing? But it doesn't work that way. We can't tell when the battle is almost over. We don't see the dawn breaking. It just seems really dark. But you got to know it's the darkest before the dawn. And I know you're tired. I know you're frustrated. But God wants to know, will you trust me? Sometimes he lets you walk around in a situation where what you're doing doesn't seem to be working. Because he wants to know that you trust that he is working. Even when what you're doing doesn't work. Because you know what? The scripture says it's in our weakness that he's made strong. We've just got to be willing to trust him. Will you still pray when the answer hasn't come? Will you still serve when nobody appreciates you? Or better yet, when they give you some feedback you don't like? Will you still show up even when it doesn't feel like it's making a difference? Will you still circle just because I said to? This is the essence of faith. Trusting God even when we can't see. If you can see it, it's not faith. Psalms 34:1 says, I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. And this year, 2021, it is more important than ever that we learn to bless the Lord. His praise shall continually be on my mouth. What are you speaking? Are you speaking faith-filled words? Are you speaking hope? God, what is it that you want to speak to me? What is my assignment? See, each of us must decide if we want to go where God is leading. Will we trust God as we circle? Will we see what God is saying as we choose to complete the circle? I believe there's several of you here today, and you are on the verge of quitting. You just feel hopeless. You're just ready to give in, quit something that God has promised to you. Because God, I did everything I knew to do and it just didn't work. So you've lost your grip. You're letting go. You're present, but you're not really in it. Not so much you circling Jericho. It feels more like Jericho circling you. And I believe God brought you here today so that you could hear these words, that this might be your last lap. Don't stop now. Don't stop now. Will you complete the circle? Will you believe God? I've asked for